The war was over, but the galaxy was just beginning to understand what that meant. The Galactic Council had formally dissolved itself after 4 years of fighting, not because they had been completely defeated, but because they had finally learned what humans had been trying to teach them from the beginning. True strength came from cooperation, not domination. Ambassador Zeth Ka stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, representing the former Council worlds in the first truly democratic government the galaxy had ever known. The Assembly Hall was a human design, built around the radical concept that every species should have an equal voice in galactic affairs, regardless of their technology level or military power. Zeth Ka had spent the last year working with human diplomats to create a new form of government based on principles that most species found difficult to understand. The idea that leadership should be earned rather than imposed, that disagreement was healthy rather than dangerous, and that strength came from diversity rather than uniformity. The humans had not conquered the galaxy in the traditional sense. Instead, they had shown every species what was possible when people worked together as equals rather than as masters and servants. President Dan Rogers addressed the assembly from the speaker's platform, his words being translated into 3,000 different languages simultaneously. Dan had been a small-town mayor before the war began, but he had become humanity's first galactic president through the same process that had won the war. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the situation demanded it. The war is over, Dan said, but our real work is just beginning. We have torn down an empire that lasted 3,000 years, and now we have to build something better in its place. The humans did not fight this war to become your new rulers. We fought because we believe that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. The response from the assembly was mixed. Some species embraced the human vision of galactic democracy, while others struggled to understand how civilization could function without clear hierarchies and submission to authority. The concept of voluntary cooperation was so foreign to most alien minds that it seemed like chaos. Dr. Carter stood in her new laboratory on the neutral world that had been chosen as the Assembly's headquarters, working on the greatest challenge of her career. The quantum virus that had ended the war had also crippled much of the galaxy's technology, and Lisa was leading the effort to rebuild the computer networks that held galactic civilization together. The new systems would be different from what had come before. Instead of centralized networks controlled by a single authority, the galaxy would have distributed systems that no one could shut down or control completely. It was a technological reflection of the political changes taking place throughout known space. Lisa's team included scientists from dozens of different species, each contributing their unique perspectives to create innovations that none of them could have achieved alone. The humans had learned that diversity was not just a political ideal, but a practical advantage in solving complex problems. Admiral Susan Pierce had been promoted to Supreme Commander of the new Galactic Defense Force, a military organization unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of being an instrument of conquest and control, the Defense Force was designed to protect the freedom that the war had won. Susan's fleet included ships from every major species in the galaxy, crewed by volunteers who had chosen to serve the cause of galactic freedom. The human approach to military organization had been adopted throughout the force. Leadership based on competence rather than species, tactics based on creativity rather than rigid doctrine, and strategy based on protection rather than domination. The HFY Defense Force's first major operation was not a military campaign, but a rescue mission to worlds that had been devastated during the war. Human ships worked alongside former enemies to provide disaster relief, medical aid, and reconstruction assistance to anyone who needed help. Commander Ben Hayes led one of these relief missions to a world that had been blockaded during the final year of the war. The planet's population was starving, their infrastructure was in ruins, and their government had collapsed. It was exactly the kind of challenge that humans had learned to see as an opportunity. Ben's mixed fleet of human and alien ships arrived to find a world in chaos, but within weeks they had organized the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. Ships that had been built for war were converted to carry food and medical supplies. Weapons factories were retooled to produce construction equipment. Military engineers became civilian contractors rebuilding cities and infrastructure. The operation succeeded not because of superior technology or resources, but because of the human approach to problem solving. When faced with a crisis, find a way to help and worry about the details later. Dr. Emma Clark published her definitive study of Galactic Psychology, a work that revolutionized how every species understood themselves and their place in the universe. Her research had revealed that the diversity of intelligent life was actually the galaxy's greatest strength, not a source of conflict to be managed. Emma's work showed that each species had evolved unique ways of thinking and problem-solving that were perfectly suited to different types of challenges. The Council's mistake had been trying to force everyone to think and act the same way, when the galaxy's problems required the full range of different perspectives that only diversity could provide. The humans had won the war, not because they were superior to other species, but because they were willing to learn from other species and combine different approaches to create new solutions. They had taken alien technology and improved it, adopted alien knowledge and expanded it, and worked with alien allies to achieve goals that none of them could have accomplished alone. Captain Amy Foster found herself in command of the first integrated exploration vessel, a ship crewed by representatives from 20 different species working together to explore the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. The mission was a perfect example of what the new galaxy could accomplish when different species worked together as equals. Amy's ship, the Horizon, was built using the best technology from every major species, crewed by volunteers who had chosen to push the boundaries of known space. The human contribution was not superior technology or greater intelligence, but the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The Horizon's first discovery was a planet inhabited by a species that had never been contacted by the Council, a peaceful civilization that had developed along completely different lines from any known form of life. Instead of trying to conquer or control them, Amy's crew made first contact as equals, offering friendship and knowledge rather than demanding submission. Zeth Ka addressed the assembly on the 5th anniversary of the war's end, reflecting on how much the galaxy had changed. The former Council worlds were now thriving democracies, the client species had become independent nations, and the galaxy was exploring and expanding faster than ever before. The humans taught us something that we had forgotten in 3,000 years of empire, Zeth Ka said. They showed us that civilization is not about control but about cooperation. It is not about making everyone the same, but about celebrating our differences and learning from each other. The assembly had become more than just a government. It had become a symbol of what intelligent life could accomplish when it worked together. Laws were passed by consensus rather than decree. Disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than force, and progress was measured by how much the galaxy's species were learning from each other. President Rogers stood before the assembly for his final address as humanity's representative, preparing to step down from office as the new constitution required. The humans had insisted that leadership positions should rotate among all species, ensuring that no single group could dominate the others. When this war began, Dan said, "The Council asked us why humans always win. The answer is simple. We win because we never give up trying to find a better way. We win because we believe that every problem has a solution, even when that solution seems impossible. And most importantly, we win because we know that the greatest victories are the ones that make everyone stronger." The galaxy had learned that humans always won not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had developed the ability to turn any situation into an opportunity for growth and improvement. They approached every challenge with the assumption that it could be overcome, every setback as a chance to learn, and every enemy as a potential ally. Dr. Carter's final report on the technological renaissance that followed the war showed that the galaxy was advancing faster than ever before. The combination of human creativity with alien knowledge was producing innovations that neither could have achieved alone. Faster-than-light travel was becoming safer and more efficient. Medical technology was extending lifespans across all species, and communication systems were bringing the galaxy closer together than ever before. The secret was that humans had taught the galaxy to embrace failure as part of the learning process. Other species had been taught to avoid mistakes and follow established procedures. The war had raged for 3 years, and the galaxy was no longer the same place it had been when the conflict began. The Galactic Council's authority was crumbling as world after world quietly withdrew their support and began looking to the humans for leadership. What had started as a simple conquest had become a revolution that threatened to tear apart 3,000 years of galactic civilization. Commander Ben Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberation, flagship of the joint human-alien resistance fleet. The ship was a perfect example of what the galaxy was becoming. Built with human engineering principles but incorporating the best technology from a dozen different species, crewed by beings who had never worked together before but had found common purpose in the fight for freedom. Ben's fleet was heading for the Centauri system, where a council garrison was holding 3 billion civilians hostage. The council had announced that any further human attacks would result in the extermination of entire worlds. It was a desperate move that showed how far the once mighty empire had fallen. The human response was typically direct. They were going to rescue the hostages and destroy the garrison, because that was what humans did when faced with impossible choices. They found a way to do the impossible. Dr. Emma Clark had spent the last year studying the psychological profiles of every major species in the galaxy, and her conclusions were reshaping how humans understood their place in the universe. The research confirmed what many had suspected. Humans were unique in ways that went far beyond their refusal to surrender. Every other intelligent species had evolved from prey animals, herd creatures, or peaceful omnivores. Their social structures were built around submission to authority, cooperation within groups, and conflict avoidance. They had natural stopping points in their aggression, biological and cultural mechanisms that prevented total warfare. Humans had evolved from pack hunters on a death world where cooperation meant survival and aggression meant food. They had no natural stopping points in their aggression, no built-in submission responses, and no instinctive fear of authority. When humans decided to fight, they fought until they won, or until there was nothing left to fight with. More importantly, humans were the only species that actively sought out challenges and dangers. While other species used their intelligence to avoid problems, humans used their intelligence to solve problems that other species considered unsolvable. The Liberation dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Centauri system and immediately began implementing a plan that would have been considered insane by any military strategist in the galaxy. Instead of trying to fight through the Council's defenses, Ben's fleet was going to rescue 3 billion people while simultaneously destroying the forces holding them prisoner. The plan required perfect timing, incredible luck, and the kind of coordination that should have been impossible with a fleet made up of ships from 20 different species. It was exactly the kind of plan that humans specialized in making work. Admiral Susan Pierce led the main human battle fleet in a direct assault on the Council's home system. Her force was the largest military formation humanity had ever assembled. Over 800 ships built from captured alien technology and human innovation, they were going to attack the heart of the Galactic Empire and end the war once and for all. The Council had withdrawn their best remaining forces to defend their homeworld, creating the largest concentration of military power in galactic history. Over 3,000 ships protected the system, along with orbital weapons platforms that could destroy entire fleets and defensive systems that had never been successfully breached. Susan's attack plan was simple in concept and incredibly complex in execution. Instead of trying to fight through the defenses, her fleet was going to turn the system's own massive size against it. The Council homeworld system was so large and heavily defended that it had become impossible to coordinate effectively. Humans were going to exploit that weakness. Dr. Lisa Carter had achieved her ultimate breakthrough in understanding alien technology. She had figured out how to create a quantum virus that could spread through the Council's entire computer network simultaneously, shutting down every artificial intelligence system in the galaxy at exactly the same moment. The virus was based on human creativity patterns that alien computers could not process without becoming confused and shutting down. Once activated, it would cascade through the Council's faster-than-light communication network in minutes, crippling their ability to coordinate their forces or operate their most advanced technology. Lisa's finger hovered over the activation switch, Once she pressed it, the galaxy would be plunged into technological chaos. The Council would lose their greatest advantage, but so would everyone else who depended on alien computer systems. It was a desperate gamble that could backfire catastrophically. It was also the most human solution possible. If you cannot win the game by the rules, change the rules. Back in the Centauri system, Ben's rescue operation was proceeding with the kind of organized chaos that had become the human trademark. His ships had dispersed throughout the system, each one executing a different part of the plan. Some were engaging the Council garrison directly, others were infiltrating the planetary defense grid, and still others were coordinating with resistance, groups on the surface. The key to the operation was that the Council forces could not predict what the humans would do next, because the humans themselves were improvising as they went. Each ship captain was authorized to modify the plan as needed, creating a dynamic battle that changed constantly. Captain Amy Foster piloted her ship through the atmosphere of Centauri Prime, dodging surface-to-air missiles while broadcasting evacuation instructions to the civilian population. Her vessel was not designed for atmospheric flight, but Amy had learned to push alien technology beyond its design limits. The ship's computer was constantly warning her that her maneuvers would cause structural failure, but the warnings had been wrong for 3 years. Amy's job was to coordinate the evacuation of the planet's capital city, while the main battle raged in orbit. It should have been impossible to evacuate 3 million people while under fire, but humans had developed a talent for doing impossible things as a matter of routine. In the Council home system, Susan's attack was beginning. Her ships did not approach as a single fleet, but infiltrated the system in small groups over several days disguised as merchant vessels, diplomatic transports, and even garbage scows. By the time the Council realized what was happening, there were human ships scattered throughout their most secure system. The attack began when Lisa activated her quantum virus. Across the galaxy, alien computer systems began shutting down as they encountered logic patterns they could not process. The Council's command and control network collapsed in minutes, leaving their forces blind and unable to coordinate their response. Susan's ships revealed themselves simultaneously and began attacking targets throughout the system. Without their computer systems, the Council forces could not respond effectively to the distributed assault. Their superior numbers and technology meant nothing when they could not communicate or coordinate their actions. Commander Ben's rescue operation succeeded beyond all expectations. His mixed fleet evacuated the entire civilian population of Centauri Prime in 6 hours, while simultaneously destroying the Council garrison and capturing enough alien technology to build 100 new ships. The operation became a model for human military doctrine: achieve multiple objectives simultaneously through coordinated chaos. The success at Centauri had an effect that went far beyond the military victory. The images of human and alien crews working together to save civilian lives were broadcast across the galaxy, showing every species what cooperation looked like when it was based on equality rather than dominance. Zethka watched the reports from his position aboard a human diplomatic vessel, where he was helping to coordinate the surrender of Council forces throughout the galaxy. The speed of the Council's collapse had surprised everyone, including the humans. Once their computer systems failed and their command structure broke down, the mighty galactic empire crumbled like a house built on sand. The humans had proven that the Council's power was based on the myth of inevitability rather than actual strength. Once that myth was broken, the reality of the situation became clear. The Council ruled through fear and technological superiority, but they had never learned to inspire genuine loyalty or respect. As reports came in of Council forces surrendering throughout the galaxy, Zeth-Ka realized that the humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not just defeated the Council militarily, they had created an alternative vision of what galactic civilization could be. The human model was based on voluntary cooperation, mutual respect, and the radical idea that no species had the right to rule over another. It was a concept so foreign to the established order that most species had never even considered it possible. Dr. Clark's final psychological analysis revealed the ultimate secret of human success. They won not because they were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they approached every challenge with the assumption that it could be solved. Other species looked at impossible problems and accepted that they were impossible. The war had been raging for 2 years, and the impossible was happening everywhere across the galaxy. Human ships were striking at council worlds that had been considered untouchable for centuries. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years was being challenged by primitives who had barely learned to travel between stars. Chief Engineer Nick Peters stood in the construction bay watching his latest creation take shape. The Defiance was humanity's first true warship, built specifically to fight the Council. It incorporated everything humans had learned about alien technology, combined with innovations that made alien engineers declare the design impossible. The ship used 3 different faster-than-light drive systems simultaneously, which should have torn it apart. Instead, the conflicting energies created a resonance field that made the ship nearly invisible to alien sensors. The weapons were even more radical, combining human kinetic projectiles with alien energy beams to create projectiles that could punch through any known defense. Nick had learned that alien technology was designed with safety margins and backup systems that prevented catastrophic failures. Human technology was designed to work right up to the edge of total destruction. When you combined the 2 approaches, you got ships that were incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous to operate. The human crews did not mind the danger. They had learned that in war, the most dangerous weapon was often the one your enemy thought was too crazy to use. Zeth Ka had been studying human psychology for months, and what he discovered made him question everything the Council believed about intelligent life. The humans were fundamentally different from every other species in ways that went beyond mere culture or technology. Every species the Council had encountered had evolved with natural limits on their aggression. They had built-in stopping points that prevented total warfare and allowed for negotiation and surrender. These limits were biological necessities, programmed by evolution to prevent species from destroying themselves. Humans had no such limits. They had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, where only the most aggressive and adaptable survived. Their planet was a death trap of predators, diseases, natural disasters, and toxic environments. Instead of developing peaceful instincts, humans had developed the ability to turn any situation into a weapon. Zeth Ka's research revealed that humans were the only known species that deliberately put themselves in danger for entertainment. They jumped from great heights, raced vehicles at deadly speeds, and engaged in combat sports that could result in serious injury. They called it fun. More disturbing was their approach to problem-solving. When faced with an impossible challenge, other species looked for ways to avoid or minimize the problem. Humans looked for ways to turn the impossible into an advantage. Captain Kelly Adams led her strike force through the Council's outer defense perimeter around the industrial world of Kepler Prime. The planet was heavily defended, with orbital, weapons platforms, and a fleet of over 200 ships protecting the massive factories that supplied the Council war effort. Kelly's force consisted of 30 human ships, most of them built from salvaged alien technology and held together with determination and prayer. They were outnumbered 7-1, facing weapons that could destroy planets, attacking a target that had never been successfully assaulted. It was exactly the kind of mission humans excelled at. Kelly's ships did not try to fight their way through the defenses. Instead, they used a tactic that the Council defenders had never seen before. The human ships separated into individual components that looked like debris from destroyed vessels. The pieces drifted through the defense perimeter, ignored by sensors that were looking for intact ships. Once inside the perimeter, the ship components reassembled themselves and launched their attack. The orbital weapons platforms were designed to fight off massive invasion fleets, not to deal with individual ships that materialized inside their defensive ring. The attack lasted 30 minutes, and when it was over, Kepler Prime's industrial capacity had been reduced to rubble. The human ships had already disassembled and were drifting away as debris, leaving the Council forces shooting at empty space. Dr. Lisa Carter made her greatest breakthrough when she figured out how to weaponize the Council's own artificial intelligence systems. The alien computers were incredibly advanced, but they had been programmed with the same limitations as their creators. They could not conceive of truly destructive behavior. Lisa introduced human logic patterns into the alien AI networks, patterns based on human approaches to problem solving. The result was computer viruses that did not just corrupt data, but actively worked to sabotage alien systems in creative and unpredictable ways. Alien ships would find their life support systems playing human music at maximum volume, their weapons targeting their own forces, and their navigation systems plotting courses into the nearest star. The AI viruses spread through the Council's computer networks like a plague of creativity and chaos. The Council's response was to shut down their AI systems entirely, but that crippled their ability to coordinate fleet movements and manage their technology. They were being forced to choose between fighting with reduced capabilities or risking their entire technological infrastructure. Admiral Koreth stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical display with growing despair. The human forces were everywhere, striking at targets across the galaxy with no apparent pattern or strategy. Every time the Council concentrated forces to defend an important system, the humans would attack somewhere else entirely. The humans had turned warfare into a game of chaos, where the only rule was that there were no rules. They used merchant ships as warships, civilian transports as bombers, and even medical vessels as weapons platforms. They disguised military strikes as humanitarian missions and turned peace negotiations into ambush opportunities. Worst of all, other species were beginning to learn from human tactics. The Council's client races were quietly adopting human innovations, and some were openly expressing admiration for human creativity and determination. Commander Ben Hayes led a mixed force of human ships and vessels from 3 different alien species that had quietly joined the human cause. The alliance was unofficial, since none of the alien governments dared openly challenge the Council, but individual ship captains had decided that the humans offered a better future than continued submission. Ben's force attacked a Council supply convoy using tactics that combined human aggression with alien technology and knowledge of Council procedures. The attack was perfectly coordinated, with each species contributing their unique capabilities to create a combined assault that was greater than the sum of its parts. The convoy was destroyed completely, and its cargo of advanced weapons and technology was distributed among the resistance forces. More importantly, the attack proved that humans could work with other species as equals rather than conquerors. Dr. Emma Clark's research into alien psychology revealed why the human approach to warfare was so effective. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved with social structures that emphasized hierarchy, submission, and conflict avoidance. They understood war as a tool of policy, something to be used carefully and abandoned when the costs became too high. Humans understood war as a test of will, something to be won completely regardless of the cost. They had never learned that some victories were not worth the price of achieving them. This difference made human behavior incomprehensible to alien minds. When the Council destroyed human colonies, other species would have negotiated for peace. Humans used the destruction as motivation to fight harder. When the Council offered terms for surrender, other species would have accepted reasonable conditions. Humans treated any offer of surrender as an admission of weakness. The Council had designed their entire approach to warfare around the assumption that their enemies would behave rationally. Humans did not behave rationally. They behaved like humans. Admiral Susan Pierce took command of the largest human fleet ever assembled. Over 300 ships built from a combination of human innovation and captured alien technology. Her target was the Council's regional command center at Wolf 359, a heavily fortified system that controlled Council operations across a dozen sectors. The attack would be the most ambitious human operation of the war, striking directly at the Council's command structure rather than just raiding their supply lines and industrial targets. Success would cripple the Council's ability to coordinate their forces. Failure would result in the destruction of humanity's main battle fleet. Susan's ships jumped into the Wolf 359 system and immediately began the most complex military operation in human history. Instead of trying to fight through the massive defenses, they used the system's own infrastructure against itself. Human ships disguised as Council vessels infiltrated the orbital facilities and began sabotaging them from within. Other ships used The system's communication networks to spread Lisa's AI viruses throughout the Council's computer systems. The main fleet engaged the defensive forces in a series of running battles that kept the enemy occupied, while the real attack proceeded. The battle for Wolf 359 lasted 3 days, and when it was over, the Council's regional command had been completely destroyed. More importantly, the massive ship floated in the darkness between stars, its silver hull stretching for miles in every direction. Inside the command center, Ambassador Zethka studied the data on his screen with growing excitement. Another primitive world had been found. Another species ready to join the Great Galactic Council. This would be his 300th first contact mission, and like all the others, it would end the same way. The yellow star ahead of them burned brightly, and the third planet showed all the signs of intelligent life. Radio signals, crude satellites, and small ships moving between the inner worlds. The species called themselves humans, and their technology was laughably basic. They still used chemical rockets and had barely begun to explore their own solar system. Zethka activated the translation matrix and prepared the standard message. Every species received the same greeting, the same generous offer. Join the Council, willingly, and receive protection, technology, and guidance. The alternative was always the same too, though it rarely came to that. Most species were smart enough to recognize superior power when they saw it. The human ship appeared on their sensors as they entered the system. It was small, crude, and moved with the slow grace of primitive fusion engines. The humans had named it Phoenix, which their databases said was some mythical creature from their legends. How fitting that they would name their ship after something that died and came back to life. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the Phoenix and watched the alien ship approach. It was huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. The thing was easily 10 times the size of their largest space station. When the communication came through, Jake listened to the translated message with growing anger. The aliens spoke, like they owned the galaxy. They demanded immediate surrender and offered humanity the chance to become servants in their empire. They called it protection, but Jake had been a Marine before becoming a space captain. He knew what conquest looked like when it was dressed up in pretty words. Jake opened a channel back to the alien ship. His response was short and simple. Thanks for the offer, but we'll pass. On the alien bridge, Zethka stared at his communication console in confusion. No species had ever refused the Council's offer. The translation must be wrong. He ran the message through the computer again, but the result was the same. The humans had said no. Admiral Korath stepped forward, his blue skin darkening with irritation. In 300 years of leading Council fleets, he had never heard such a response. Species begged to join the Council. They offered tribute and promised loyalty. They did not simply refuse. Perhaps they do not understand our power, Korath said. We shall demonstrate. The order went out across the fleet. Energy weapons charged and targeting systems locked onto one of the human mining stations in the asteroid belt. The station was small, probably home to no more than a few hundred humans. Its destruction would show the humans what happened to those who opposed the Council. The beam lanced out across space, turning the mining station into expanding gas and debris in seconds. The message was clear. Submit or face destruction. Jake watched the destruction of Mining Station 7 on his screen. 300 people had lived and worked there. Now they were gone, killed to make a point. The aliens thought this would scare humanity into surrender. They were wrong. All ships, this is Phoenix Command. Jake broadcast to the small human fleet. We are at war. The human response surprised everyone, especially the aliens. Instead of begging for mercy or negotiating terms, the human ships accelerated toward the massive alien fleet. It was obvious suicide. The human vessels were tiny compared to the Council ships, and their weapons were primitive chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. But the humans attacked anyway. The first human ship to reach the alien fleet was the Liberty, commanded by Captain Amy Foster. She had been a test pilot before the space program, known for pushing experimental aircraft beyond their limits. Now she pushed her ship the same way, diving between the alien vessels and firing everything she had. The aliens' energy shields absorbed most of the human weapons easily, but Amy had noticed something in the battle data. The shields flickered for just a moment when they absorbed energy. She flew straight at the largest alien ship, firing continuously, and at the last second, ejected in an escape pod. The Liberty struck the alien ship's shield generator just as it flickered. The explosion tore a hole in the massive vessel's defenses, and the other human ships poured through the gap. They were still hopelessly outmatched, but now they had hurt the enemy. Zeth-Ka watched in amazement as the primitive humans continued their attack. Any rational species would have withdrawn after losing the first ship. These humans seemed to get more aggressive with each loss. They were ramming their ships into alien vessels, using their own destruction as weapons. Admiral Korath ordered the fleet to fall back and regroup. In all his centuries of warfare, he had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose, even though they clearly had everything to lose. Their tactics made no sense, but somehow they were working. Jake's ship was badly damaged, but he was still alive and still fighting. Half his crew was dead and the Phoenix was running on emergency power, but the alien fleet was retreating, and that was something. For the first time in galactic history, a council fleet had been forced to withdraw from a battle with a primitive species. As the alien ships pulled back to a safe distance, Jake opened another communication channel. This time his message was different. You wanted to see what humans are like. Now you know. We don't surrender, we don't give up, and we don't die quietly. If you want our world, you're going to have to fight for every inch of it. Zeth-Ka transmitted the human message back to the council homeworld. The response would take days to arrive, but he already knew what it would be. The council had never faced real resistance before. They would send more ships, bigger weapons, and expect a quick victory. But as Zeth-Ka studied the tactical data from the battle, he began to suspect that the council was about to learn something new about warfare. The humans had lost every ship in the engagement, but they had damaged vessels that should have been untouchable. They had forced a retreat through sheer determination and creative tactics. Most disturbing of all, the humans had seemed to enjoy the fight. The war between humanity and the Galactic Council had begun, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the outcome was not certain. The aliens had superior technology, vast numbers, and centuries of experience. But the humans had something the galaxy had never seen before. They had the absolute refusal to accept defeat. 6 months had passed since the first battle, and the galaxy was watching something impossible happen. The humans were not losing. They should have been destroyed weeks ago, but instead they were spreading across multiple star systems and causing chaos wherever they went. Dr. Lisa Carter worked in her laboratory deep beneath the surface of Mars, surrounded by pieces of alien technology that her team had salvaged from destroyed council ships. The fragments were more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen, but Lisa was determined to understand how they worked. She had been Earth's leading expert in exotic physics before the war started, and now she was humanity's best hope for survival. The alien energy shields had seemed impossible to penetrate, but Lisa had discovered they worked by creating a resonance field that deflected incoming energy. The problem was that the same field could be turned into a weapon if you knew the right frequency. Her first breakthrough had come when she realized that human music could disrupt the shield harmonics. Lisa smiled as she connected a modified electric guitar to an alien power cell. Rock and roll was about to become humanity's secret weapon. General Ryan Brooks stood in the command center on Luna Base and studied the holographic display showing Council fleet movements across the sector. The aliens had committed nearly 1,000 ships to hunting down human forces, but they were fighting a war they did not understand. Every time they concentrated their fleet in one system, the humans would attack somewhere else. Ryan had learned guerrilla warfare, fighting in Earth's last conflicts before humanity reached the stars. The same principles that worked in jungle warfare worked in space. Stay mobile, hit hard, disappear fast, and make the enemy commit more resources than they could afford to lose. The key was never fighting the war the enemy expected. The Council thought in terms of massive fleet battles and territorial control. Humans thought in terms of making the enemy's life miserable until they gave up and went home. Lieutenant Amy Foster had survived the destruction of her first ship and was now piloting something that should not exist. The Revenge was built from the wreckage of 3 different alien vessels, held together with human engineering and sheer determination. The ship's computer constantly warned her that her modifications violated every known safety protocol. Amy ignored the warnings. Safety protocols were for people who expected to live through their missions. She flew through the asteroid field, chasing a Council patrol ship that was twice the size of her hybrid vessel. The aliens were faster and had better weapons, but Amy had learned to use their technology against them. When the patrol ship fired its energy weapons, she used Lisa's new shield disruptors to turn their own shots back at them. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and Amy was already turning toward her next target. The Council had sent hunting parties to track down human raiders, but the hunters were becoming the hunted. Back on the Council flagship, Admiral Korath studied the latest battle reports with growing frustration. His forces were winning every major engagement, but somehow the humans kept getting stronger. Every ship they lost seemed to be replaced by 2 more, and the new human vessels were increasingly dangerous. The humans had started using captured, alien technology in ways that defied logic. They combined energy weapons with chemical explosives, mixed artificial gravity with kinetic projectiles, and turned life support systems into bombs. Their tactics were chaotic, unpredictable, and surprisingly effective. Worst of all, other species were beginning to take notice. 3 client races had requested permission to study human battle tactics, and the Council's intelligence reports suggested that some worlds were quietly cheering for the humans to win. Zeth Ka had spent months studying human history and culture, trying to understand what made them so different from every other species in the galaxy. What he found was disturbing. Humans were the only known species that had domesticated carnivores, turned their planet's deadliest environments into transportation routes, and invented entertainment that involved deliberately risking death. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved from prey animals or peaceful herbivores. They understood submission, cooperation, and conflict avoidance. Humans had evolved from pack hunters who brought down creatures 10 times their size by simply refusing to give up. The difference was fundamental. When other species faced superior force, their instinct was to submit and survive. When humans faced superior force, their instinct was to find a way to win anyway. Chief Engineer Nick Peters worked in the shipyard orbiting Earth, building humanity's response to alien technology. The new ships were unlike anything that had ever existed. They combined human creativity with alien science in ways that produced vessels that were fast, deadly, and completely unpredictable. Nick's latest creation was the Wildfire, a ship that used alien faster-than-light drives powered by human fusion reactors. The combination should have been impossible, but it worked. The ship could jump between star systems faster than anything the Council had, and it carried enough firepower to destroy vessels 3 times its size. The secret was that humans were willing to take risks that no sane species would consider. They built ships that operated at the edge of catastrophic failure, used weapons that might destroy themselves along with their targets, and flew missions that other species would consider suicide runs. Captain Kelly Adams led the first major human counterattack on a Council shipyard. Her fleet consisted of 20 ships, most of them built from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity. They were going up against a fortified position defended by over 100 Council vessels. The odds were impossible, which meant they were exactly the kind of challenge humans specialized in. Kelly's ships approached the shipyard using a tactic that the Council had never seen before. Instead of trying to break through the defenses, they used the yard's own construction materials as weapons. Cargo containers became kinetic projectiles, fuel lines became bombs, and the shipyard's artificial gravity generators were turned into massive weapons that tore the defending ships apart. The battle lasted 6 hours, and when it was over, the shipyard was destroyed, and the human fleet was already jumping to their next target. The Council had lost a major industrial facility and dozens of ships. The humans had lost 3 vessels and gained enough alien technology to build 50 more. Dr. Carter made her second major breakthrough when she figured out how to hack the alien faster-than-light communication system. The Council's entire command structure depended on instant communication across the galaxy, but Lisa had found a way to turn their own communication network into a weapon. By introducing specific feedback patterns into the network, she could cause communication relays to overload and explode. Better yet, she could insert false orders into the system, sending Council fleets to the wrong locations or causing them to attack each other by mistake. The Council's technological superiority was becoming meaningless because humans used it in ways that no rational species would ever consider. They turned defensive systems into offensive weapons, communication networks into tools of sabotage, and even medical equipment into instruments of war. Admiral Korath finally understood what he was facing. The humans were not fighting a war in any conventional sense. They were fighting like a force of nature, chaotic and unpredictable and absolutely unstoppable. Every victory against them seemed to make them stronger, and every new tactic they developed was more dangerous than the As for the first time in his long career, Admiral Korath began to consider the possibility that the Council might lose this war. The humans had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had taken the Council's own technology and turned it into a weapon against them. As reports came in of human raids across a dozen star systems, Admiral Korath realized that the war was entering a new phase. The humans were no longer just defending themselves, they were going on the offensive, and they were winning. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans decided to fight a war, they did not stop until they had won it completely.